Representative of Liberia for the statement, and now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Mr. President, thank you for chairing. And I particularly want to thank you, Mr. Freitas, for your briefing. And I'll point out that Mr. Freitas is in exile, having fled the regime. Thank you for your courage, and thank you for shedding a light on the true atrocities of the illegitimate Maduro regime. This past weekend, colleagues, the United States successfully carried out a surgical law enforcement operation facilitated by the U.S. military against two indicted fugitives of American justice, narco-terrorist Nicolas Maduro and Cilia Flores. Colleagues, Nicolas Maduro is responsible for attacks on the people of the United States, for destabilizing the Western Hemisphere, and illegitimately repressing the people of Venezuela. As Secretary Rubio has said, there is no war against Venezuela or its people. We are not occupying a country. This was a law enforcement operation in furtherance of lawful indictments that have existed for decades. The United States arrested a narco-trafficker who is now going to stand trial in the United States in accordance with the rule of law for the crimes he's committed against our people for 15 years. A similar action was taken in 1989 against Manuel Noriega. He was arrested, indicted, convicted in a court of law, served in prison in the United States and in Panama, and the Panamanian people, the American people, are safer for it. And undeniably, the region was more stable. This law enforcement action was directed consistent with the President of the United States' responsibility as Commander-in-Chief to protect Americans at home and abroad against a fugitive who is directly responsible for narco-terrorism that has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans and created destabilizing violence throughout our hemisphere. Nicolas Maduro and his co-defendant, Cilia Flores, have been transferred here to the United States to stand trial for their crimes. Maduro was indicted by a grand jury in the Southern District of New York and faces very serious criminal charges for his involvement in a wide-ranging conspiracy to conduct narco-terrorism, to traffic cocaine and other drugs, and conducting international weapons trafficking. The overwhelming evidence of his crimes will be presented openly in U.S. court proceedings. Colleagues, Maduro is not just an indicted drug trafficker. He was an illegitimate so-called president. He was not a head of state. For years, Maduro and his cronies have manipulated Venezuela's electoral system to maintain their illegitimate grip on power. In fact, just 2 years ago in 2024, a UN panel of experts report found that the election in that year was absolutely and completely a farce and fell well short of the most basic transparency and integrity measures essential to upholding credible elections. If the UN and the United Nations in this body confers legitimacy on an illegitimate narco-terrorist and the same treatment in this charter of a democratically elected president or head of state, what kind of organization is this? We should note that over 50 countries, many nations, including the European Union, including a number of Latin American countries in the region, and of course the United States, again, over 50 countries rejected the legitimacy of Maduro's re-election following the disputed 2024 elections and do not recognize him as Venezuela's legitimately elected president. Maduro unlawfully refused to peacefully cede power after the Venezuelan people voted him out of office in the 2024 election. So therefore, Maduro was a fugitive from justice. He is the head of a vicious foreign terrorist organization, Cartel de los Soles. This regime-sponsored enterprise coordinates with and relies on other vicious criminal organizations, namely Tren de Aragua, again, among others, to carry out its objective of using illegal narcotics as a weapon against the United States. And for its part, Tren de Aragua is a designated foreign terrorist organization with thousands of members, many of whom have unlawfully infiltrated the United States and are conducting irregular warfare and undertaking hostile actions against the American people and against the United States. It's terrorizing criminals commit brutal crimes, including murders, kidnappings, extortions, and human, drug, and weapons trafficking. This administration, President Trump, will not stand for it. In fact, in March of 2025, President Trump declared that Tren de Aragua is quote, Tren de Aragua is undertaking hostile actions and conducting irregular warfare against the territory of the United States, both directly and at the direction, clandestine or otherwise, of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. Maduro and his cronies have partnered with some of the most violent and prolific drug traffickers and narco-terrorists in the world for decades, facilitating the flood of illegal drugs coming in the United States, estimated to be several hundred tons annually. He has become rich, incredibly wealthy, off the misery of untold numbers of Americans, Venezuelans, and others, aiding and abetting international terrorist organizations like Hezbollah, coordinating with corrupt Iranian officials, and other malign actors to influence not only the region, but to malignly influence the United States. In fact, in its own 2025 World Drug Report, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime identified Venezuela as a key trafficking route in the Western Hemisphere for illegal drugs, predominantly cocaine, entering the United States and increasingly Europe. As Secretary Rubio stated just yesterday, this is the Western Hemisphere. This is where we live. And we're not going to allow the Western Hemisphere to be used as a base of operation for our nation's adversaries and competitors and rivals of the United States. You can't turn Venezuela into the operating hub for Iran, for Hezbollah, for gangs, for Cuban intelligence agents, and other malign actors that control that country. You cannot continue to have the largest energy reserves in the world under the control of adversaries of the United States, under the control of illegitimate leaders, and not benefiting the people of Venezuela, and stolen by a handful of oligarchs inside of Venezuela. But it doesn't stop there. Numerous UN and international human rights organizations have issued reports documenting serious human rights abuses by the Maduro regime, including reports of extrajudicial killings, political prisoners, torture, and arbitrary and unlawful detentions. In fact, over 8 million Venezuelans have fled the country, destabilizing their neighbors in the region and creating the world's largest refugee crisis. Members of this council, colleagues, the United States wants a better future for Venezuela. We believe a better future for the people of Venezuela and for the people of the region and the world is stabilizing the region and making the neighborhood that we live in a much better and safer place. And this is why millions of Venezuelans that have fled this brutal regime are celebrating and cheering around the world as this body pontificates, including Those celebrating are including in my home state of Florida, where hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans have fled this regime's brutality. I want to reiterate, President Trump gave diplomacy a chance. He offered Maduro multiple off-ramps. He tried to de-escalate. Maduro refused to take them. President Trump made it clear that the narco-terrorism must stop, and yet it continued. The United States will not waver in our actions to protect Americans from the scourge of narco-terrorism and seeks peace, liberty, and justice for the great people of Venezuela. I thank you, Mr. President.